Recognizing the value of the information, my husband and I immediately started incorporating the information into our field by resequencing close to 35,000 frames in our colony to match their positioning, and then it never stopped. And that was fun because we never had a day off that winter. So just what is this proper positioning of feral homes that you told me about? It concerns understanding the Y formation of the pyramids called at the base of the wild homes, and in manufactured beeswax foundation at the base of cell imprints that beekeepers place into their colonies. And when foundation came on the market, and since men back then and people doing things always mimicked nature properly and copied her properly if they wanted to do things, the original foundations were made 4'7", 4'8", 4'6" in size, depending on where you were making the foundations, as it was taught worldwide. And yet people didn't put the pieces together, but they put making the proper sizes to match their localized areas for like your European area, down more at the lower Mediterranean area, up in the Nordic states, here in the USA, and depending on whether you're up by the Canadian border or down in Texas or halfway down, like, you know, they'd answer the ones out in Missouri as to who was doing it that had the money to go with the new stuff that was coming on to the market.
Dee.
Uh-huh. Okay.
The upward, I'd like to call the upward part the Y and the bottom part the pyramid. If that's
right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Should the Y face the center of the hive and the pyramid outside, or vice versa?
Okay, what you look at when you compare it to the wild, which is what we'll be going in, is the Y is this way facing in, because it's like a ledge. And when they first build the comb in a hive, if you look at it in wild stuff, especially the little tiny combs you're seeing for the first time, it's always brewed in the center facing down. Once they get the first 1, 2, 3 combs built, they keep expanding. But in the meantime, if it rains, until they can get the first wave or two of brood to replace the old ones that just swarm, that'll be dying off, that have to go out and gather the honey, the pollen, to feed them to get that first generation or two going, which can take 17 to 21 day cycles, which can be a month to 2 months. You've got to get through as fast. And so to keep the rain, if say rains come on, you'd always see it positioned in a certain way, and but then you might see 2 or 3 different ways of positioning the center, but it's all pretty uniform depending on the layout of the land for how the winds and the rains and everything would blow on through. And so you'd have that, but then you'd have it up going this way, which is like a porch, sorta, to keep it from washing out what was there. So if the rain came, you wouldn't have all the honey washed to the ground until they could get it either covered with a propolis cap above it if it's just hanging on a branch, or they'd have it be inside a cavity and it would be fine. And you know, it's just basics for explanation that you'd see these pictures etched in the old pyramids inside with the bees and their stingers and working and laying, and all of a sudden different pictures you're seeing from thousands of years ago are making sense, but yet nobody wants to look at them closer or talk about it. Even though you can talk to few on site, yeah, I think I've seen something like that. But then they're told to look at other stuff. So anyway, that's pretty much what this is here. This foundation is basic to field management. It's used to stimulate domestic honeybees to build both brood and honeycombs, but if 85–90% is worker, no matter how big it is, going up and down the ladder, as they used to call it, as they eat it and stock it and keep eating, filling at the top, forcing down, and eating up all winter to make the cavity again. It's like, what are they doing? You know, how are they doing it? How is it naturally positioned there? Well, that's what this is about. Now this is the second page. Now if you copy something exactly to use, which is the purpose of our foundations, or was originally, and then you don't use it as originally designed and placed by the bees themselves, how can beekeepers blame bees for building and doing things wrong in the beehive? Which is upsizing in 15 to 20 year waves. And then if you don't know, because you're not doing it this way to see the differences, you're doing it this way in a circle, so you're just placing it wherever you want real fast. Then in actuality, it's man's improper placements and positioning of manufactured foundations contrary to original natural design, and then could be causing today's bees' internal problems relative to working and drawing combs. Well, what does this mean? Well, as you look at it more, there's a lot of things to think about that I've got written down. Like when they make a queen cell, do they make it facing in, or is it always facing out and hanging down? Well, it's always to one side of the comb, if you know what I mean. It's always out and hanging down. And there's a left and a right side for that way the queen cells are made, for the way the basic brood is laid. If you change the pattern and the queen always lays in a set thing going from center to outside, even in drawing, filling each frame in succession, and you start changing stuff, but then you put it in backwards, and then they've got to rework the Y's at the bottom, blunting out the Y after a while because they can't keep up with it. You know how much stress that puts on a hive where they're not out water foraging, they're not out doing for fresh nectar, fresh pollen. They're trying to fight, if they're too big, how do you fight the extra pests and predators that are in the hives? And it's plus, if they want to do it right, and then all of a sudden you see this overlay comb, and then you look at the base, after I looked at it, a lot of this overlay that we were seeing, well, they were changing the positioning of the comb to match the way they wanted it, and not where we had put it in backwards. And you can eliminate a lot of burr comb and everything else that makes it messy and very time consuming, having to get into a hive, how to open it up and work with it. So,
So are you saying that your Y would face each other, and then on the other side, the triangle would face each other, and then the Y would alternate?
I always, when we went through and we repositioned a fast 35,000 combs, which was fun.
Hard on your eyesight.
Oh man. Ed said, I can't live, we got to do it fast. And I'm going, thank you. Yep. Okay, I made a mess for myself. But anyway, we got through it, and all the Y's are facing in towards center for the center line, so they know where the center is. And then the other is facing out. But then as we got into it more and more looking at it, other things came into being, which was in the brood nest, younger centered, and then older, and then at certain times, you'd find the older, once it's capped with the younger, keep going to the sides. And why is this? With the younger on the outside and the older centered. And then you find out, looking at scientific literature, that the older bees, as they're developing more and their wings are coming out before they chew the caps off, they can have, what do you want to call it, deformed wings because of the chilling, versus the eggs in the youngest just laid larvae that can take twice the cold weather to get through, overnight being cold-blooded animals where they go into deeper hibernation versus being about ready to emerge, and they've got to flex to get things going, and then all of a sudden they can't use their legs, wings, and other parts of their body. Question?
Dee, I learned somewhere that if you have the two Ys facing, I just want to verify this is true or not. If the two Ys are facing in, the bees being born can actually bump into one another. And so part of the Housel positioning is that it offsets the cell. Like when you have all the Ys facing in, the cells aren't exactly across from one another. Is that true? That they're slightly offset? Like if you do this properly, it offsets each cell.
Well, yeah, because there's rows of cells. I mean, you can put the foundation on top of each other. There's rows of cells that go in where everything corresponds better.
And the other thing I just wanted to mention is that we use the PF 120s, the plastic, and we spent a lot of time trying to figure out, like I know you mark the frames with a V, but one interesting thing for anybody that wants to regress their V's this way is that the mold has a rectangle at the very top that's universal on all the frames. So once you establish the relationship of the Y or the inverted Y, you'll always know by just looking at the top of one of the PF.
Right inside.
So for us, left, right, it depends on where you're looking at it. But
you really need to look at the base.
So for us, we've identified the triangle on the rectangle on the very top left side is the proper orientation. So whenever
that's if it's drawn out comb, but still you have to look inside the base because it might not be what you think.
No, we went through and we held it up and we figured out which was the left side and right side, and we marked the top of the frame accordingly.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is with the plastic Man Lakes.
Man Lake plastic is not good. It's a regression tool down, but it's sized wrong.
I totally respect that, but that's a separate conversation. But for us,
look, I don't have a fully drawn honey supercell, but what you're talking about does not make sense in my mind, because you got to look down into the base of the cell, and when I hold it up to the light out in the field, I look for empty cells. I don't look at the top. I don't look at that top rim.
I do that, but instead of marking, you mark your frames with a V or a Y at the top, and all I'm offering to the group is that with the Man Lake.
No, you cannot mark it. It don't work that way.
So I'm just saying that I mark the year that I put the brand new frame in, so I know what year the comb is, because I follow my comb. But for us, we automatically, because we predetermined it with one frame, and it's universal, because we looked at about 10 to 20 of the Man Lake frames, that box is always on the same side, so you can quickly determine Housel positioning, which we've done.
You always mark the frames you're using after you're using them to keep them the same way, but it doesn't mean it was manufactured that way. That's just something that after the bees are doing it, you keep doing it the way the bees are doing it. And there's a big difference. You follow your bees, you do not follow, oh, this is Man Lake. Man Lake at the bottom is not there. Also, Man Lake is not sized right, and I'm not going into it.
Yeah, there's no Y, there's no X or Y or pyramid at the bottom of those. It's just a round.
It's just a round dingy hole.
Yeah, there's no Y on the bottom of honey supercell either.
On ours there is.
There's a Y on the bottom of honey supercell that doesn't really have.
I'm buying small stuff.
Either one, whatever you use, once you have it faced and you mark it, you use the marker the same way.
Yes.
That's what she's saying.
They're both doing the same.
But she's saying, using different words for.
So would it be Y like this?
Yeah, but you have your Y's down, and with the beeswax stuff, the honey supercell, not the honey supercell, but the Sun He Moon stuff, you've got your Y to see. And a lot of your basic foundations, you can see the Y. The drawn out one, you cannot. But once you mark it, you have to use it the same way, as if you're positioning it. And there's a big difference that way. And it's just the way the
So when you find the Y's down,
Uh-huh.
they're facing in, right?
Yeah,
Until
Y
you get
down
to the
is
middle,
Y up is out.
And so that's what Grandpa was doing with the Y's in.
Yeah, he was changing it from one side to the other.
Okay.
He was being uniform for the way he was facing towards center. He was always doing a Y down.
And so if you let the bees draw out their own comb, do they automatically draw it out that way?
Yeah.
I like it. Okay.
Now the only thing that might give you problems is where you've got your bee yards put, which means you're up on a marsh, a hill, an arroyo, the way the wind and the rains go. And so, but we'll get into that because there's the Y's this way, but on some frames, if you look, you got Y's this way, but you might have it facing in another direction halfway down the comb because of the way the sunlight hits as the daylight goes.
Okay.
Because there's north-south facing, there's east-west facing to do like the pyramid, so you're copying your solstice and the way the sun shines that the bees would key to, where they'd look for cavities that would match your solstice sun changes first, and then they take the other cavities last. But then they'd modify, and instead of having straight, they might have an off. And you might see two or three different center positionings, but normally 90% of the time it's the Y facing in.
Okay.
But then once they're going and you get it all uniform, it can relieve a lot of stress. And the main thing that we found is after we did the Housel positioning in all our colonies in 30 bee yards, with 100 beehives in our biggest yard, maybe 10 or 12 in our smallest, 2 or 3, but an average of 25 to 30, maybe 40 in our other yards. 90–95% of all our swarming stopped, and I've said that before. It just stopped because by having the Y's positioned right in the right facing, when they draw queen cells, they draw queen cells in a specific manner most of the time. And that changes because as they hybridize more, you get different patterns. It's like salmon fighting as to where they're going to lay eggs in the pond when they finally get there. But anyway, keeping going. A Y is formed where the rhombic plates come together to form a Y impression at the bottoms of the cells. And it's the Y is seen on the wild combs and their cell bases, but that's what all the pyramids are copied from. And how they faced, if you look even down here in Arizona with your Mayans, your Anastasies, your Apache, your Hopi, all has to do with north, south, east, west facing, so they knew how to go from one part of the country to the other for navigation and could get from the west coast to the east coast or the Gulfport states up to the poles. But that's how they went around the world and why you found pyramids over in Rome. But there's pyramids all the way down to Mexico City. There's 3 or 4 pyramids here in southern Arizona that I've talked about for years. There's pyramids over in China and Pakistan and India and Japan, and it's only now coming to light what we've been saying, that every 3 or 4 months it's like they knew what was going on because they knew how to get around real fast if they wanted to, and they talked about all these communication towers of old. But it makes you wonder, because if we have our communications and yet it goes out and there's no computer stuff where they say it all goes downhill, we're going to lose the same thing for us. So if you have all your information stored on computers or digital, you've lost everything you got. You better know how to do your old paperwork files for backup. Not that I tell you to do that. But anyway, there's a right and left side to each foundation and comb when viewed, whether in a man-made colony or hanging from a limb, or a cavern, or a cave, or whatever. It's just natural. It's been copied for years. The right and left sides for facing foundation and drawn combs are determined by the top or bottom positioning of the Y formations. But we've already gone into that, so let me get to the next page. Okay, beekeepers can easily turn and look at a wild comb and see this. Likewise, they can turn a man-made comb or piece of foundation and see this also. Now, when you're doing swarm cutouts, where I told you I was doing 200 or 300 a year, depending on how you cut that comb out with the brood and put it on the frames to save, to restart faster, which is the swarm catching frames that I talk about. If you put in several smaller pieces, like these 2 or 3 on one comb, wire them in, rubber band them in, string them in, but you put them all opposite, you make stress. You do that on several combs, or you have one big comb and then the next big comb, but you put them in all opposite, where you don't keep them uniform. You have stress. And you just caught a swarm with brood. You want to know why your bees just swarmed out and went to another place? Or do you want to keep your swarm there and have it build up faster, and then put your real comb around it, positioned right, and have a hive that's in production within 1 or 2 months? That's building up good. And it has a lot to do with keeping swarms you catch from reswarming. And people just don't get it in their heads because they don't want to teach it. But it has to do with the way you mimic nature, so she's in alignment, so that the bees aren't stressed out, so that they can work. The queen can go back to laying eggs. The bees are foraging for water, nectar, pollen, so that they can do brood, get the extra surplus stores in. But if they've got to fight everything being backwards, like you're constantly putting stuff in backwards in your own beehives and creating stress for burr comb and overlay comb and everything else that's in there, why would they stay and work something up new if you just cut them apart and when someone came into your house and ransacked everything and you've got to keep straightening it up every other week? Pretty soon you're going to say and leave. Not that you do that.
You just answered why I lost my hive.
Well, as soon as you know how to position and put your combs right, you know how many swarms you can get and work them up faster and keep them and put an outfit together for making money. Makes a big difference. But yet, where do you see it taught other than prove it works? And yet it's nothing new. It's been going on for centuries.
So Dee, say when you take your surplus honey and you're going to move it and give it to a weaker hive, or you're going to, I don't know if you have to store your honey, I mean, I might have to freeze them. Then do you then mark it so that, because you're going to be putting it...
Yeah, once I put it in a handmade swarm catching frame that I used to bring here to show people, I don't know if, you know, we'd put it in, we'd mark the top and everything. You just use it and go on. You know what I mean? And a lot of the swarm catching frames where I put comb in and then they draw it uniform because they're not stretched, trying to fix one odd spot or this spot or whatever. A lot of those swarm catching frames I'll take in the honey house, take a scratching comb with. I'll extract it just like a normal frame and keep on going. You know what I mean? But maybe that's too easy for some people. I don't know. They'd sooner have a big mess on their hands and cry, oh, but I just lost my swarm. When my bees are dying, what am I going to do? You know, like what's causing it? I have no idea. But if it means being out of alignment with nature, which most people want, like clean, healthy food and everything else, if you're going to copy the way she's got stuff laid up, just like how other animals nest, be it wasps or whatever, that they're building with combs and that, don't you want to do it to match what's there? And if you change stuff, you think they want to use it? It makes it hard. Anybody else with questions? Okay, I'm going to keep going here. It says, if you've not seen or noticed this before, take a sheet of foundation, put it in front of you on a flat spot to look at. Well, that's what we just did, passing stuff around. There are two ways to rotate a sheet or comb in a frame when looking at it. Most beekeepers are taught early on to carefully rotate a sheet or frame of bees from top to bottom, vertically, so as to disturb the bees on the comb as little as possible. But if you rotate it this way slowly, you're doing the same thing. It's just that this way, there's more control over you at Bayer and Monsanto and with the universities, because you're not seeing the differences. To note the key to nature to keep things straight, so you don't have all the burr comb, the cross comb, the overlay, the stress that makes them swarm, so they got more control, so they sell more bees, which is more queens sold, more packages sold, more equipment sold, because a lot of people will trash frames and just buy new ones. And that's money. But would I say that? No. Now you go down, it says next with the sheet of found in front of you, turn the sheet not vertically but instead left or right. Well, we've already gone into that, so let me go on. And that's a lot of extra work versus having bees sized naturally to match nature. Plus, get this, with bigger bees going for the bigger fruits and vegetables that have lesser vitamins, minerals, and nutrition for us to eat for being healthy instead of the smaller, more medicinal plants, where all the stuff comes from our herb, spice, and stuff that have made people healthy for years. What have we done then for giving money to the medical industry for a third whammy? But would I say that? I mean, it's like we're getting hit on all sides. Anyway, okay. So going smaller and matching nature starts the center comb for maximum production of worker bees, which is what we want. We want maximum production. We want to match nature. We don't want things upsized 40 to 60%. And if the line crosses for drone brood at 5.4, 5.5, and the drones take the hit with all the maladies with your nosema, your chalk broods, your foul broods, your pests coming in as it's bigger and the composition of your royal jelly changes. What they're gathering pollen-wise changes, so you've changed your pollen that's stored in the cells. That has a big bearing. You have all the stuff that's with propolis and pollen and all the stuff in the honey that's stored in the cells. That's all your different microbes. But your microbes, if they all need a very varied diet, if you're giving them less, you have less digestive gut microbes that's available to the bees that can make you sicker, but it's less available to us, where they used to eat honey and pollen to feed even preemie babies to keep them alive, be it horses, cattle, goats, chickens, humans. They used to give the preemies the raw milk mixed with raw honey so that could reinfuse their guts and keep them going and everything. Heck, we've lost all of that for lesser stuff. And yet when they looked at me, when Arthur Harvey came out here with the USDA doing testing for digestive gut bacteria with the Morgan Lab with the West Campus of Yale and all that stuff, I have the best digestive gut bacteria in the US with over 8,000 to 10,000 different microbes that each thing feeds a different part of the body and stuff. Well, it does the same thing with bees for keeping them healthy. You've got to have bees that match nature. They can look at all your medicinal plants, and you go out here and look at what's blooming from here to upstairs out on the lawn. You see your little verbenas and your little filaries coming on with blooms not even a 1/16 of an inch big, and you think these big oversized bees can pollinate that stuff and get that nectar and that pollen out? You need naturally sized feral bees. But would I say that? Nope. Anyway, to continue. Let me go on to the next page. Okay, here you hear what beekeepers have ended up with then is all foundation or all combs in the colony with the Y down for foundation facing center and all foundation with the Y up facing towards the sides. And so I did that for typing. Now, this can be done two ways. Now, once an average of 4 or so worker combs are drawn on each side of the center worker comb, beekeepers will find the net combs built a combination of drone honeycombs. So what you're looking at the brood boxes is then what I've got here. You've got your 4 center, that's hardcore worker. Your peripheries is always the drones for defense of the hives, because males are always the best defenders. They always take the hit first for sick. Even the stallions and the big bulls and out in the field are the ones that fight with their horns and their legs kicking and everything for all the wolves and badgers and snakes and you name it that they have to keep off of the female so they can keep rearing young, eating and working and gathering stuff that they need. It's nothing new. And bees are livestock. They are animals, except they're cold-blooded. They're not warm-blooded. It's just basic understanding. So what you're looking at in wild combs hanging is you have your center when they first start to get as much brood going. The next 2 on each side, so you have anywhere from 4 to 5 in the center. And then each side you got 2 or 3 frames of honey and pollen being critical for brood rearing, but honey is critical for not only feeding and making the royal jelly mixed with gas and then feeding the adults, but it's also a thermal regulator, so you can go to minus 60 degrees below zero or a good 120, 130 or 40 above for overheating and keep a hive at a constant temperature so you can keep everything alive, going, brooding, and going out for maximum production, where other people with these big hives all out of sync and out of balance don't have bees that can even fly for hours while your bees are out foraging at the crack of dawn. And there are a lot of feral honeybees that on full moons during the summertime when it's warm, you'll see them foraging all night in a lot of areas. But I wouldn't say that. But they can do it, but you've got to be in tune with nature. And yet we were for thousands and thousands of years, like with all our herbs and spices that made us healthy. Then all of a sudden, since the 1900 on, when the board of directors before Hitler split, fighting with Bayer and Monsanto and the Leech von Richters and all that stuff went over the Alps and all the families split going through Spain and France to go by way of Canada into here. A lot of hybridization started, and that's when the film Alice in Wonderland came on with the see through the looking glass, and here's all these bigger fruits, the bigger vegetables, the bigger animals, but it's less healthy. Plus they're eating wrong because they're overcooked and everything else, and where you used to eat multi-greens, fresh fruits that were naturally sized, and you never overcooked your meats beyond a medium rare. Here came all the stuff to get you to eat stuff that they wanted, so they'd have you for sick for pharmaceuticals with the old vampire routines and everything else, because you can't eat that real good half-cooked meat with the red in it that has your B12 and 6 to keep you from having Alzheimer's or anything else for needs for your body, but I wouldn't say that either. But lots been going on for good, you know, since the 20s and 30s for control. And it's like Europe fighting with the Americas, who's going to control the world. And we're not even talking Russia and China yet as to who's fighting what for who's going to sell what and do everything else economic-wise. And yet we go around the world trying to teach the third world countries how to keep them fed and alive. They can't live off the land no more. What the hell happened in those places? It makes you wonder about our history.
So in a feral comb, do they make it the same way on both sides in the middle one?
Pretty much, pretty much. And what's wild is Italian bees are the smallest race on earth. then comes carnioles that butt in with them. Off to the right is your Black Sea with your Caucasus Mountains and all that stuff that transitions in as you go over to your Apis cerana and that they talk about. But you see the old books talking about this where it joins, butts together, and you've got your Apis mellifera, but you've got your small black bees. But then depending on what country you're in, they have different names, from Caucasian to, you know, and it's like, where are you, Lithuania or Germany or English, you know, they all got to have their own specific names. And yet when you look at work where they went over and measured the bees over in Pakistan and India and Southeast Asia during the Vietnam Wars with Korea and all that stuff, the cerana bees paralleled the Apis mellifera bees by size, by latitude, by altitude. And what's funny is the bees key to cell size by worker size, with the drones and queens then following what the workers want to do. You don't measure the drone cell or the queen cell, you measure the worker cell to get what you need to do to know what your proper sizing is. And it's that way whether you're working with, what do you want to say, temperature gauges and different things. It's a, you know, it's just different. They key to the women, because the women technically do the work while the men are out guarding, which is good because they always take the disease hit first and they like the fighting first. But you look at old books and you see the women out there in dresses working beehives or holding bees up. Boy, those pharaohs are sure killers. Well, they came to be killers because of the fight over South America with Argentina and Brazil, who would oversee queen rearing and a lot of production for certain foods that were coming on that they brought down to Argentina with Curanat. But hey, we still got to feed the world. It's just like humans fight with click fighting too, just like every other animal. Anybody else with a question? Okay. Anyway, this transition to larger starts slow, but gets more pronounced the closer to the outside of the brood nest you go across the first worker cell comb. So what you do when you set the boxes up, you have your center, you have your 2, 3, or 4, 5 in the center that are worker, but then you have your next slightly sized bigger with your pollen button, with your honey. Then you have your bigger, then you go, it's like you go in waves of sizes to the outside till your biggest combs are always buttoned the side of the box. Other than that, then as you feed more small cell in to get to your 80% smaller and more uniform to 85 to 90%, you cull the outside bigger up to the next box as you feed the foundation in, your smaller stuff in the center. And then in meltdowns for reprocessing wax and comb, you always do your drawn out wrong combs first, your bigger drone combs first, and you always save your worker brood with your smallest, darkest for last, because the queen always lays in the smallest comb first and the darkest first, and so you always keep that in the core of the brood nest more for healthier hives. And it's just hard to put into words. Now, bottom paragraph, the placement of these bigger combs, drone combs on the outside peripheries to protect the worker combs from damage. Animals attacking the feral hanging nest will pull off the outside larger combs for food, and many times go on after eating their fill. And most animals can't eat more than 1 or 2 full frames of honey. It fills you up fast. But in the meantime, while they're eating that, the workers that have the stings while the drones don't, even though the drones are taking the hit, doing the protecting, The females come out and they start stinging all over because they're eating, they're not paying attention, and they're going for the eyes, the ears, and the soft cavity parts. Not necessarily their throats, but their ears, their eyes, their nose, nostrils, their piss joints, and everything else. You know, and it's a lot of fun. Anyway, that's it. Okay, weaker combs with less wax cell walls and thus tear loose, but they serve to protect the outside combs. And what that means is the bigger the comb cell size, the lesser wax and cell walls for strength for hanging on the bars. So drone cell, once it's filled with honey, will always fall off first, while the stuff that's on the worker comb with an extra 1,200 to 2,000 cells per frame with more like 2x4s in a building for supports will fall off the combs last. Positioning of the combs in man's domestic hives should follow the above for drone honey cell positioning relative to worker pollen honey cell positioning. All good drawn out combs should be placed to center, then frames combs with peripheries of drone cells not more than 10% kept. So you learn to always cull anything that has more than 10 or 15% drone comb, and you always keep it on the periphery. So when you put foundation in a hive to draw out, normally when I do it, I'll put a little 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch gap down the bottom and give the bees the option of filling in what they want, worker comb or drone comb. They want drone comb, let them fill it. They want worker comb, let them do that. And if it's in the center of the brood nest and it's all small comb, 90% of the time they'll draw worker comb. If it's on the peripheries, they'll draw drone comb. And you look at the early combs that were sold in the old books, you see even with Dadiant foundation combs being sold with these diagonal cuts on the side or these round holes on the side that you could punch out, and you could get them to raise odd drone patches on the peripheries. And you think they didn't know what they were doing to be able to put that into to be manufactured, so you had the option of the bees doing that? They knew what they were doing making that foundation early on by observation. Yet where is it taught? That round hole was for drone, unless you can read old books pre-1920 back to the 1880s between Dadiants and ABC and XYZ. Okay, importance of Housel positioning to field beekeeping. As I said earlier, intrigued in recognizing the value of Housel positioning, we've sequenced close to 35,000 frames in our colonies, and we'll do more as we continue to work our bees. Which 35,000 divided by 5 deeps isn't much when you're keeping close to between 1,500 and 2,000 hives that deep. It was a lot of work. By resequencing our combs to match our wild comb positioning, final internal colony problems relative to our honeybees drawing out foundation, how the bees work the combs appear to be lessening or stopping altogether. Much stress seems to have been eliminated. My husband and I manage our hives using 4.9 small cell beeswax with unlimited brood nest management of 2 to 3 deep boxes with 1 to 2 deep supers for honey, with an overall average colony size of 4 to 5 deeps. We see no problems in using 4.9 in conjunction with Housel positioning, as all this does is copy wild, naturally small honeybee comb positioning found hanging on found hanging on what? Limbs of a tree. This way we end up with a field management program that's biologically harmonious to wild honeybees. At the same time, by not having to use various treatments of chemicals, drugs, essential oils, food-grade mineral oil, acids for parasitic mite control, accompanying secondary diseases and miscellaneous bee pests, we also gain clean products of the hive to sell, and bees harmonious with nature, again, that live. And when this was checked by Arthur Harvey with the USDA, we had less than 1 part per billion of anything for any pesticide of everything checked that was known to be placed in any hive worldwide. And that's posted on the organic list. We were the cleanest in the country, while guess who was the dirtiest? Not that I'd say talk bee labs, with 50% worse or more. Anyway, okay, final internal colony problems lessening or stopped by proper positioning that we saw were queens not laying in inserted frames placed into the brood nest. Many times beekeepers, as a part of field management throughout the active year, insert drawn combs into the brood nest for the queens to lay in as a means of producing more honeybees. These combs can be dry or extracted wet combs, but on subsequent hive checks that can be days or even weeks later, beekeeper comes back to find the comb not used, but the combs on either side being utilized or laden. Loss of buildup of worker bees necessary for production is then the loss of brood that could have been generated for each, say, 21-day brood cycle of worker bees. You ever added stuff to a hive? But why aren't they using it? What's going on? And you're looking for something wrong or sick? Did you put it in backwards? Okay. 2, excessively bulged, drawn out honeycombs with the next frame either burred or hardly drawn. It's not uncommon for beekeepers to find bulged, drawn out honeycombs with newly drawn out comb 2 to 3 inches thick in layers with new foundations, like your overlay combs and things. Well, I don't want to draw that, it's position drawn. We got to change the way it's positioned, and they'll overlay the proper, and you'll look at it, and you'll see 2 different layouts with the bottoms of the Ys, with the new stuff now being the way they want it. It's crazy. It's not uncommon to find both. Here it is. Transporting such honeycomb combs home can be trying as bumps are driven over that cause the frames to knock, rub together where they're bulged. Because they won't draw one, you put it in and you got here, where if you put it all in facing, they draw them out unison all the way out to the side. But you can put it in the frame if you put it in backwards, and might not be drawn out, but you got that where you take, well, I'll keep the foundation there, I'll just use it. And you put it back in the hive, and you got these 2 bulged combs you put in to bring home, and what's all that running in the back of the trunk or the seat or the back of the pickup truck? I mean, how do you position it? You got to put a frame of foundation around it to keep it from rubbing, or you can't get the honey home to extract to have even something to sell. It sure cleaned up a lot of that problem. Okay, bees refuse to move up to the next higher box or super of either drawn frames or new foundation. Well, this does not happen too often on good honey flows because, you know, they've got plenty of workers and everything. On average, the poor flows where you're scrapping on a tight year, this could be a problem with bees showing reluctance to expand up to the next higher box or super to either fill empty frames or draw out foundation. This found happening in few hives unless they're worker brood raised and honey stores gathered. Once frames are positioned according to the way the Y is facing, the bees move up and continue to expand and work. Mainly because they don't have to do the time factor, straightening all the stuff out you're putting in backwards constantly. They can actually go out, fly further on years that are more stressed with lack of rain and stuff blooming. And instead of a 2 or 3 mile circle, they can go 5, 7, 8, or 10 miles even, which is honey production for making a living and busting even. Which can save you money for not having to backfeed honey and lose stores that you could be extracting and selling. Okay, 4, odd frames of foundation not drawn are on bee sidewinding. From time to time, beekeepers place a new frame of foundation into a brood box or soup or drawing combs, only find your bees ignore it. Or they might have 2 to 3 frames of either new foundation or drawn empty combs, or a combination of bees seem to ignore it. Okay, through observation, we know the Y positioning the new frame of frame was probably face drawn, causing the bees to go around the improper sequencing. And this also means, have you ever seen a hive where you don't have it centered and you see them snaking like this up and down the hive? Because they're trying to keep to the Ys that they want for the positioning that they want, and this other stuff is wrong. And you see the snake going up, where if you straighten everything out, they go right up and expand, and they use the whole box again, which is more production and stronger hives by the end of the year, which stores in the barn for overwintering without, you got to take stuff out of your pocket to do it. Okay, bird foundation, overlay foundation. Already talked about that. From time to time, beekeepers find frames of new foundation that's been overlaid with sections of either bigger or smaller combs drawn out. We've seen bigger drone honeycombs overlaid on frames positioned with the Y formation inserted backwards. We've also seen work with pollen combs overlaid on frames with the Y formation inserted backwards. Well, looking at the overlaid comb, interesting to notice the fact that the bees in overlaying the pattern seem to be reworking the position of the Y the way they want it. And which means as you put it in, you learn to hold it to the sun. See the Ys on the foundation or drawn comb even. You can always find a few in pockets here and there, so you know how to put it back on in. Okay, 6. Transitional combs containing various cell sizes are built, similar to overlay combs built upon new sheets of foundation. Beekeepers can find transitional combs being built by honeybees containing numerous cell sizes. Well, that has to do a lot of times with multi-mating with the queen. She's not laying with one particular race or strain, she's laying with 3, 4, or 5 different types of drones that she's been mated to. And they each want their own section, and each one is slightly different. Queens are suddenly raised at wrong times of the active year, causing swarming problems. Beekeepers, in adding empty drawn combs or freshly extracted wet combs in the brood nest, sometimes go back and find hives requeening at odd times of the year. Beekeepers can also add odd frames of new foundation into the brood nest and end up with a few queens being raised along with worker larvae. They can also have changed nothing from the previous year in the brood nest, but all of a sudden the queen requeening starts, even though they know the queen they had is young. This should not be happening. This can be especially frustrating when the honey flow is coming on or in progress, or they actively follow breeding programs trying to requeen their colonies yearly to avoid this. Why would colonies want to requeen more than once throughout the active year when old books say they live 3, 5, 7 years, supersede and stay put? They don't swarm constantly. What changed? From what we've seen in our colonies, it's comb positioning with the frames in backwards. Because every time you look at it, you pull something out, you don't put it back the same way. With the comb positioned backwards and thus out of alignment with other combs in proper sequence, beekeepers can trigger spontaneous requeening in colonies by failing to know which way the Y is facing. Beekeepers must take note, remember one way the formation of Y faces is inverted and creating a ledge for larvae to lay upon that the bees use for fast build-up, swarming, etc. I mean, you're making your bees swarm because you're putting the stuff in backwards. Okay, last page. And then I'm done with this, and we can take a break, ask questions, or whatever. But it's time to, you know, at 4:30, get another speaker up, I think. Okay, on the other side of the comb and or foundation, the Y faces up and helps to form a slanted roof to protect larvae and stores gathered from sun, rain, etc. But with the slanted roof of the Y facing up has another purpose in the colony. For it is only on the side where the Y formation faces up and helps to form this slanted roof that bees raise queen cells that face downward for requeening. So where the Y is up, it's always on one side, it's not in, and if you reverse it around and you stress the bees out, you start them raising queen cells. Therefore, beekeepers not positioning foundation drawing can spontaneously trigger superseding and thus swarming in their colonies. With hives under stress already from disease, pests, beetles, predators, mites, besides often on programs of various treatments for saying improper positioning takes less effort to trigger problems, one of which can be spontaneous requeening and saying, well, we've got enough of this, just get the hell out of here. Whose fault is it then? The bees or the beekeepers for not following proper positioning for sequencing of managed combs? And last note, going back to colonies that were sequenced with proper positioning, the disposition of the bees goes back to the early pictures you see of the women pioneers in their dresses working combs and no bee suits on. The bees get 80–90% gentler without all that stuff in the hives, besides the fact they're not under stress from you constantly facing everything backwards on them for them to fix. Other than that, I'm done talking.